Hey, the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible by Samaritas, which is the state's largest private foster care and adoption agency. But they do a heck of a lot more than that. They've been serving homeless families, persons with disabilities, abused and trafficked women. They're also one of the largest resettlement agencies in the state. They provide market rate and affordable housing for seniors and HUD housing for families. And they also have skilled nursing, memory care, and rehab communities in Grand Rapids, Cadillac, and Saginaw. Samaritas, thanks for their support. Great organization doing great stuff all around the state. And this is the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit. We are live at the Mackinac Policy Conference, Detroit Regional Chamber's annual event. And one of the people that I talk to every single year up here is my guest, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Craig, it is great to be with you, and it's great to be back on air with you. I missed you for a little while.
Well, we should let folks know you were on the Board of Governors at Wayne State University, which, of course, held the license when I was at WDET, and we had many conversations back then, which is about a lot of stuff. But let's talk about what you're doing in Congress right now. You have been out there with Fred Upton the last couple of days talking about at least the Michigan delegation finding ways to get along, cooperate, work together on projects that everybody agrees on. And most of that centers on environmental issues, obviously, PFAS contamination, Asian carp. Let's talk about that for just a second. A lot of money from the Army Corps of Engineers to actually do something about this. Are you satisfied? Is it enough?
It's never enough because we've got a lot of problems. But I will say that this delegation, when it comes to fighting for issues that really matter, cleaning up our water, this administration sends the Great Lakes Initiative budget up every year, takes all the money out. That every state that touches the Great Lakes works together, restores the money, many times increases the budget over the year before. We've got Great Lakes are more than 20% of the fresh water in the world. We have to protect these lakes. We've been pushing the Corps of Engineers for a very long time to address this issue on Asian carp. We've seen the reports in the last few weeks that we're actually seeing DNA in our Great Lakes. That needs to worry all of us. We're going to take a trip on July 1, bipartisan, but we've got to actually implement the plan. It took too long to get the report out, and we have got to make sure the Asian carp do not hit our Great Lakes.
The Army Corps of Engineers is not known for being fast.
No.
They are thorough.
Yes, they are.
So once they get started on this, obviously that's going to be there. But, I mean, what's the potential timeline for actually putting a better fix in place?
Well, I think all of us are. That's why when you say, is there enough money, are you happy? We need to speed this along. I think I found it very alarming when we found the DNA evidence in the Great Lakes and Asian carp in our Great Lakes. People really don't understand how dangerous that will be to the fish that are in our Great Lakes now, the threat that it is to the smaller fish, to the natural species, etc. So we have got to make sure that we are accelerating any plans and we keep them out.
Well, you mentioned, of course, the bipartisan sort of nature of cooperation when it comes to environmental issues, protecting the lakes. What about sort of like a regional bloc of elected officials from both parties to advocate for this? Are we starting to see that emerge? And is that maybe going to be a force for good in politics, that the Great Lakes as a region sort of band together on these things and push back against some silly decisions on a national level?
So, history ebbs and flows. There's been a time that the Midwest was strong and together. It's been too partisan of late. But so, for instance, we're having a dinner with Marcy Kaptur, and I've put it together with the women, Democrats and Republicans of the Midwest to look at doing those issues. We've got a Midwest coalition that we've got a Great Lakes. I'm co-chair of the Great Lakes Coalition, bipartisan. We do need to. I think too often the coasts tend to dominate politics, and we don't look at the issues that really matter to working men and women across the country. I think it's an important caucus group, and we need to pull together and make our voices heard. It's not new. In 2008, when the autos were going through a difficult time, the coasts would have put the autos out of business, and it was the Midwest states that knew the importance of the auto industry that did the automotive rescue.
Well, the automotive industry, obviously in a state of flux right now. Your late husband, of course, was a huge advocate for the auto industry. You've carried on that tradition as well. But when you look at some of the disruptions being created by ongoing disputes over trade, we're talking about potential tariffs on imports and auto imports, steel, aluminum, agricultural tariffs that we're seeing here in the state. What can we do to give some sort of certainty to the businesses that their supply chain is not going to be completely disrupted by sort of myopic decisions.
So I talked to Ambassador Lighthouser, who is the USTR trade representative at least once a week. And I understand the importance of trade. I believe it's why Donald Trump became president, because I think too many Democrats didn't understand the importance of good, strong trade policy. My problem with the president's trade policy is it's inconsistent, it's all over the map, and nobody knows what they're dealing with. I think it's very important we get a revised NAFTA, that we have to play in a level playing field. We have empty factories still all over the state because NAFTA really impacted the auto industry and hurt it and shipped a lot of jobs overseas. I will likely vote for NAFTA 2.0, I call it 2.0, with a couple of changes. One, General Motors located a plant in Mexico last August and is paying $1.50 an hour. I want a trade agreement that is going to give us a level playing field and not allow that $1.50. It has to have stronger labor enforcement in it. And two, the pharmaceutical provision in it will raise prescription drugs. Administration's very aware. The Speaker is working with them. We need to address those two issues, but we do need to, and we can't play politics. We've got to get a new NAFTA 2.0 that is a fair playing field for our workers.
Well, I mean, I think the whole idea around it originally was that the wages in places like Mexico would eventually rise, which, that never happened, really. I mean,
No,
they stayed depressed there. We've seen other countries where there's a lot of manufacturing. Average wages have actually gone up. China, it's getting more expensive to manufacture there than it used to be. But Mexico has stubbornly kept it low.
Correct.
And it did sort of lead to that imbalance. Is there anything that you could do in a trade agreement that would require them to actually pay more money?
We need to strengthen the labor provisions in the renegotiated NAFTA. We need to let them organize. We need to ensure that they're being paid more, and it has to be has to be enforcement provisions.
Sure.
That Mexico did vote on strengthening their labor laws, but enforcement's not there, and we have to make sure that there are enforcement provisions in there.
You were making some comments yesterday about a House vote on whether or not to leave the Paris Climate Accords. The House is voting, say, no, we should stay in this. We have still, most of the countries are still on board staying in this. The United States obviously wants to pull out. Symbolic vote because the Senate's never going to take this up. Why is it important to pass it anyway?
Well, I wouldn't say that the United States wants to pull out of it. I'd
No,
say
the
that
President
Trump
yes,
wants
let's
to pull out of
clarify.
it.
That
I
makes
think
sense.
that the American people think we should stay in it. I think it's very important to clarify it because we need to work with, we've seen a panel of scientific experts tell us what is happening to the environment in the world. And none of us can't see it every single day with the dramatic weather impact that we are seeing with hurricanes and fires and floods that are happening. It's, places in the Midwest like us are seeing extreme weather that we have never seen before. Temperatures below 50 degrees. Everybody's got to contribute to protecting our climate. The glaciers, the ice is melting. It's important that we send a symbol too, and that other countries know that there are many of us who think the importance of staying in the Paris Climate Accord.
Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, my guest right now on the Craig Fahle Show here on Deadline Detroit. I'm not going to ask you if you're in favor of impeachment at this point in time, but Robert Mueller made some statements yesterday about his report and frankly said, we were not in a position to charge him. We just weren't allowed to do that. There's at least a little bit more clarity on where he was coming from in his investigation. It's a lot different than what the president said. No collusion, no obstruction. That's not what that report suggested at all. Mr. Mueller seemed to want to reinforce that a little bit yesterday. We are only a year and a half out from the next election. Is this a discussion we should be having about whether or not these are impeachable offenses, or should this just be something that we let go till the next election?
So, nobody's above the law. And I think it's very important to follow the facts. And I think that, depending who you were, you heard, I think that Mueller yesterday was saying, Congress, do your job.
Yeah.
And he also, I'm on my third reading of this report, was very clear yesterday, but also in the report, that that a sitting president could not be indicted by the Justice Department.
Yeah.
So those were all clear. I will say to you that I've also, having read this report, and the thing that bothers me the most and that nobody talks about is the fact that Russia's trying to divide us as a country, and they're trying to attack the very fundamental pillars of our Constitution.
Well, he said yesterday, they succeeded.
Yeah, they are. So what I worry about is helping them succeed further. And a partisan impeachment will tear this country apart.
Well, I mean, when Richard Nixon was impeached, it became not a partisan thing. When the evidence was pretty clear that something bad happened, enough people said, you know what, it's not going to work. He's going to be gone, and the votes were there in the Senate to do it. If there is something that's clear, and you will have access to more information than most of us will at some point, once the unredacted parts are made available. Obviously, this is being dragged out through the courts. You say follow the facts. Do you think you're going to be able to get all the facts anytime soon? It's going to be difficult.
I think the president, as Richard Nixon did, and I don't know if the word lucky is the right word, but I was lucky. I was working for Senator Bob Griffin. I was young. It was an intern, but he was very good to me. He taught me a lot, and I actually flew back with him the day that he announced that he thought that the president needed to resign. And he talked to me about those facts. And I think that we need to follow. I think everybody's got to look at what those facts are. We can't turn a blind eye. So I think that's why I think oversight is very important. I think the president, the things that bother me the most is the president saying, I'm not going to do anything.
Yeah.
It's unacceptable to say you're not going to do anything for 18 months. You can't refuse. The Congress is an equal branch of government. You cannot refuse to provide necessary data. He's not sending witnesses up to the Hill on anything. That's unacceptable. And I think if he keeps going down this path, it is going to make it very difficult to have any choices.
Well, and it's obviously something that, I don't want to say it's a distraction, because you guys have been passing a lot of bills on the Democratic side.
You've been
passing a lot of stuff, but is this something that is getting in the way of productive dialogue and work?
Both President Clinton and Richard Nixon, when they were under these clouds and impeachment hearings were being held, got things done. I mean, the EPA was created by Richard Nixon. A number of Endangered Species Act was passed when that was going on, and President Clinton did several major pieces of legislation too. President Trump's refusal to look at anything or do anything else, I think, is very dangerous. And I hope that he won't do that, and we'll have to.
Well, there's been a lot of focus on Speaker Pelosi and how she's handling this and trying to keep this caucus in line. A lot of attention being paid to some of the newly elected members of Congress, and is the party lurching leftward, all this kind of stuff. Do you think people are fairly looking at what the Democratic Party is right now, or is it all through the lens of 2020 and we're just looking at the wrong things?
So I know that I'm doing what I think is right, and I don't think you can look at. I'm doing what's right for this country because I took an oath to protect the United States of America, and that's what's driving me. And I think that's what's driving Nancy. I think we love this country. I have strongly supported her where she has been, and I've said that many times because I am worried about what a partisan impeachment would do and how it would tear this country apart. And I think that's what's driving Nancy right now. Michigan is reflective of the rest of the country when it comes to our congressional delegation. But we're all close. We all talk to each other. Rashida, whose district abuts me, but I talk to Haley and Alyssa every day. Andy. We're a delegation that talks to each other, works together, and we have different perspectives, but we'll listen to each other, and then when it's right for Michigan, we come to that conclusion. And I think people need to not fear different perspectives. Compromise isn't a dirty word. That's what we've got to do. But I think that we're in a very serious time for this country.
Well, interestingly enough, we'll sort of end on this sort of cooperation question here. But, here in Michigan, a pretty significant thing that's happening in about 10 minutes. Governor Whitmer is going to be out on the porch signing this auto insurance reform law. That was an act of compromise. This is something that has been befuddling the state for as long as I can remember. And they finally got something done. Does that give you hope for what could happen nationally?
I think it has to give us hope. I think people don't. Mike always talks about Mayor Duggan about this being a Detroit problem, but I live in Dearborn. My insurance, my policy was up June 1. It went up $2,000 because I'm a widow, and I've always had higher insurance than many because I'm in one of the top 10 zip codes, which people don't realize. fortunately or unfortunately, I mean, I still think it's an outrage, and
Yeah.
I can't believe I have to pay that much. A lot of people can't afford that much money. We have to look at these issues, and we got to come together and solve problems.
But, like I said, is there something like this? Can a piece of legislation spark people to actually work together once they figure out that it's not necessarily toxic to do so? Are we
I
that
hope so.
close to fixing
We
that
used
sort
to
of
do
balance?
that. We used to do that for a long time. As Bob Dole said, I was at something at the World War II Memorial honoring Bob Dole last week.
Yeah.
He said when he was in the Senate, his favorite thing was a bipartisan majority. We need more of those.
All right, well, we'll have to leave it right there. Congresswoman Dingell, we always appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig. Good to be with you.
This is the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit. Lots more to come. Stay with me.